Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today to have on a special guest with us, Justin Roethlingshoefer. Justin, how are you doing?
Outstanding, Jamie. How are you?
I'm okay, depending on how I did with your last name.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Right on point. You know what? If there's, as long as somebody gives it a go and takes a whirl at it, it's always outstanding. You nailed it. So
Perfect.
I give you props for leaning in.
Awesome. I appreciate that. All right. Well, I guess we can log off then.
It's done. It's a wrap.
So, all kidding aside, I am super pumped to have you on the show. I'm really excited. I'm glad you took some time for us today. So, for a little bit of context for the audience, I got to meet you at a mastermind event in Scottsdale where you came and spoke to our group, and I was not ready for the impact that it would that you would make, and in a positive way. So, yeah, for the audience out there, who are you and what are you up to today?
Yeah, so I always start with my name is Justin Roethlingshoefer, and I'm a energetic leader who empowers and enables the optimization of our earthly vessels to realize our God-given purpose. And in exploring that deeper, each and every single one of us has a calling. Each and every one of us has something that we are meant to be world class at. And the only way in which we're able to bring that to fruition, the only way that we're able to make that happen in this world is through our bodies that we know only exist for a certain period of time while that we are here on this earth. And by being able to optimize them, by being able to lean into what we need, ultimately allows us to realize that purpose and the potential that exists there, and fully exhaust that. And so that is my mission. That's our company's mission, and something that we've been leaning into as a company for about 2 years, but something that I've been doing with some of the best athletes in the world for the last 15.
Got it. And I think I failed to mention your company, which is Own It, and you are the founder. You're the CEO as well.
No, that's somebody who's far more business inclined than I am.
Got it. Okay, so
Because
Own It.
I have the best job in the world because I get to go and speak on it
Yep.
and really lean in and be the evangelist, whereas somebody else gets to deal with all the business stuff.
They have to do the work. Got it. So, what is, just briefly before we jump into your backstory, what is Own It and what services do you provide?
Yeah, so with Own It, what we've been able to do is look at true health optimization. And I always ask people, if I could interview your body and it could tell me exactly what it needed, and we could ultimately then provide it for it so it could serve you in the best way possible, would that be of interest? And people are always like, well, yeah, how do you do that? Is that
Right.
is that possible? And the answer is yes. And the uniqueness about this is that our bodies are all different. Each and every single one of us has a different cellular makeup, different genetic makeup, a different. It's had to adapt to things thus far in our life differently because of what we've exposed it to, thus having different cellular dysfunctions, different adjustments and adaptations that are ultimately holding us back from realizing the potential that we exist there. And so for us in our company, what we do is we do cellular DNA and epigenetic testing, looking at different biomarkers and then hormone paneling, and taking each individual and identifying their path as to what restoration looks like for them. And we create a team around that person. So that team might be a nutritionist and an epidemiologist. That person might be a mindset specialist and a strength and conditioning coach, all of which can now get really personalized on their journey so that they can take the steps necessary to realize those changes, and to identify the tools that need to come into play. So some people might go with ozone therapy, some people might get IV therapy, some people might have certain customized supplementation protocols, others might have different red light and exercise modalities that we put into place. Some of them might have all of the above. And so we slowly work somebody into what that journey is, but you have a team of people around you to hold your hand on that journey, and so it doesn't become overwhelming, because we know that not all tools are great for all people all the time. And there's a certain season, a certain stage, a certain cycle that we go through where it actually will help us in a large way. But there's a base foundation of habits, a base foundation of principles, from the food we eat to the way we hydrate, to the way we sleep, to the way we supplement, to the way to the environment in which we live in, that impacts us at the cellular level. And so there's so many companies out there just hawking tool after tool after process after protocol that really has nothing to do with what we need. But because it's sexy, because it's new, it's flashy, it's the new toy, we all of a sudden bite on it, but it's not actually getting to the root cause of what's going on. And that's what we are all about, is making sure that we can get foundationally down to the base cause of what's happening with each one of our clients so that we can create behavior change to create optimized lives.
Got it. Yeah, there's a whole lot to unpack there. And I like I said, I was totally moved by your presentation. Like I said, like I told you before, it was more than just a presentation, but at our mastermind event, and it's very obvious in just being exposed to you that for even a few minutes that there's more to this than just here's some here's some DNA tests, and then here's a one size fits all program for you. It's obvious that you bring a certain level of passion and kind of big picture perspective to the how of tying this in, and tying the how into each client that you work with. I was extremely moved, and just it's you can tell that you're just you bring a level of passion and energy and effort and meaning and purpose to what you do. So I'm excited to dive in here. So, as you know, From Adversity to Abundance is the name of the podcast. The whole point of the show is to inspire people and to encourage people and draw out some lessons that you've learned, Justin, through some adversity that you've been through, and hopefully take away something tactical for the listener from your story that they can apply. And because we all know that everyone has some adversity that they go through. It looks different for, just like your programs for everyone look different for each individual. Everyone's story is different with regard to adversity and abundance. And we don't pretend that we snap our fingers and all of a sudden we're magically in abundance and we have no more problems. But you can take ownership. That was a softball for you. Own it. You can take ownership of your life and your problems and deal with them head on and get to a level of abundance that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten to. So, again, geared towards entrepreneurs and investors. But let's dive into your backstory and talk about some of the adversity that you've been through. Where would you like to start off?
Yeah, so I think for me, I always start with my story. When I was 12 years old, I was playing with 16, 17-year-olds. I was born in Canada, hockey player. So obviously I was playing with guys that were much older than I was. And as I went into that first year playing with kids that were 4 or 5 years older than me, it was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't stand out as much as I usually do. And my dad said to me, he said, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid. And for me, that started this like, oh wow, that's really cool. How do I become the most consistent version of myself? How do I get into that? And so I took everything that I could control, my sleep, my eating, my training, all of these components. And I was the kid, 13, 14 years old, reading medical journals, reading every study that I could get my hands on in relation to those things. I knew the glycemic index inside and out. I knew my resting heart rate every single night because I wore a heart rate monitor to sleep. I wore a brainwave monitor to understand my brain waves and the delta, theta, beta waves that I was getting into at night. I knew my blood or had a pulse oximeter on, so I knew my blood oxygen levels. All of these things that ultimately drove me to understand how I could optimize performance and how I showed up day in and day out. And that led to my educational career, led to my playing career, came down to the US on a hockey scholarship, got an undergraduate degree in exercise science and then in nutrition. From there, it led to my master's degree, and then into my postgraduate research in heart rate variability, sleep, and recovery science. And in doing that, it was something that I knew that I had to lean into. It was something that I knew I wanted that to be like my focus point in my career. The unique point was we started to be able to realize that we could predict what was going on inside our bodies. So there was a professor I started to work with, and a lot of doctors that I started to get around, especially my postgraduate research, that started to look at biomarkers, blood markers, epigenetics, genetic slicing, that we could actually take a look at things that were happening in our bodies, things that were being passed down through generation, and our genes could actually predict certain things that we would ultimately experience in our life. For example, there's a gene that if we have that mutation, MTHFR, we can't actually absorb anything, or we can't actually absorb folate and can't utilize it in the correct way. And if we take in too much raw folate and we can't actually process it, it's going to show up in a homocysteine toxic level, which can be, again, show up in extreme fatigue, show up in chronic headaches, show up in mood and disorders, and all of these types of things. And so we start to think about this. We're like, oh my goodness, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people have this genetic mutation, we now take a look at what we feed our kids. If you start to look at, and you can go and look at like your cereals, they're all fortified with folate. Now, if they all have a genetic mutation, they're going to have these toxic levels of homocysteine running around in their body, because we're constantly plugging, not just with sugary cereals, but also with this folate fortified cereal that now is creating this ADHD type of feeling. And now you're pumping them full of ADHD medication, and you're now giving them something that they actually don't have, simply because they just had a genetic mutation to start with. And so these are the types of things that we can start to predict. Another one that we can start to get after and start to look at, and this is this comes back to my story a little bit here, is there's another genetic mutation, AHCY, that if you are positive for this, it has a propensity for addiction goes up by 400 times. And so for a lot of people who are perfectionists, or a lot of people who have this genetic mutation, they become heavily addicted to things. And addiction is not something, and for me, I'm happy to sit here on this podcast and say I'm an addict. I was addicted to education. I was addicted to hockey. I was addicted to work. A lot of people can probably understand that. And so it just shifts, right? Because the reason that your propensity for addiction goes up by 400 times is simply because you don't produce dopamine at the same level that somebody else that doesn't have that genetic mutation does. And so the only way that you get this hit and the way that you feel normal again is by doing something that releases that stimulus. So it could be video games, it could be racing cars, it could be jumping out of airplanes. Like that is the addictive gene that comes into play. So going into my story.
Yeah. So just curious, when was this approximately that you were kind of discovering all this, that you could predict all these things?
I was 24 years old.
Okay.
24 was really when I started to take everything that I had learned through my, I retired at this point from hockey, was deep into the coaching component, and had taken everything from my education, taken everything from my master's degree, taken everything from the research I'd done on myself, taken everything from my coaching in my graduateship. I went to work at the University of Louisville, went deep in the NCAA tournament, really applying a lot of these tools and tactics from HRV, recovery modalities, looking at blood work. And now we're getting into the genetic mutations.
Gotcha. The reason I asked, sorry, real quick, is that I actually did study kinesiology and was pretty into fitness, you know, believe it or not, and was an athlete myself. And it's amazing to me, you know, certainly some of the fundamentals are obviously still there. Nothing, the principles don't change, but it's amazing to me the advancements that have been made since
It's
I was
insane.
24, put it that way.
And the funny thing is even as I was looking at this and I was doing like, remember, I'm doing almost like my own education outside of the education that I was getting.
Right. Sure.
And the funny thing is I almost started to feel like class and the education was like, I don't want to say a waste of time, but it was almost like
Yeah.
so basic. I was like, this doesn't make sense with what we're
Hmm.
actually seeing in real life. It doesn't make sense with what I'm experiencing with the people I'm working with, the athletes I'm working with, the clients I'm working
Hmm.
with the research I'm doing. Like, it doesn't make sense. And why are we just addressing everything with pills and anatomy rather than real solutions at the cellular level, which is where everything happens? And
Yeah.
I couldn't wrap my head around it. And so as as I went and started to continue this work, started to realize that you could start to predict what was going on. And so now let's fast forward 7 years, and I'm now in the NHL. I'm working with my third NHL club, and at this point, I've taken 10 guys to rehab for opiate and alcohol addiction.
Wow. So not rehabbing your ankle from a
No,
sprain,
no,
but
no. This is drug addiction. This is like
wow.
real. This is real life altering things.
Wow.
And deep down inside, I'm like, there's something that needs to be changed.
Hmm.
And I started a camp for NHL guys down in Florida. And we would go through exactly what really the ONIT protocol is now, where we do DNA, epigenetic, cellular micronutrient testing, gut biome paneling, understand really what's going on inside each player, and then give personalized solutions from custom supplementation formulas to different nutritional needs to different custom meal plan supplementation, all of these things that we can do to help optimize recovery and really kind of lean into new pain management for some of these guys that are coming out of surgeries, coming out of sports injury rehab, not the rehab I was talking about.
Right.
And then how do we increase recovery tendencies? And guys loved it. It grew from 7 players when I started to
Hmm.
67 in the span of 3 years.
And at this point,
And
you were still working for the NHL,
I was still working with an NHL team at this point.
Gotcha.
I ended up going back, and as we were starting to meet, and I learned more and more that the traditional formula was, hey, let's get guys on. You come out of hip surgery, come out of shoulder surgery, ankle surgery, arm surgery, whatever. We're going to put you on pain pills. Well, let's back up to what I said earlier. When you have a genetic mutation for AHCY, your propensity for addiction goes up 400 times. Would you ever take a known alcoholic and force them to drink a beer? Of course not. But if we know that we have these guys who, let's go back to this. What did I say? Addiction shows up in a multitude of different ways. And when we ran all these genetic tests over these smaller number, but 70 guys over 3 years, 87% had that genetic predisposition. Why can you assume that? Even that's probably higher in every professional sport, because you had to get so good at something that you had to continue to focus and focus and focus. It's just like a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of executives and a lot of very successful people also have that genetic predisposition.
Yeah.
And so if all of a sudden you take that same person and you all of a sudden give them a pill, a pain pill that is highly addictive, what do you think the possible outcome becomes?
I mean, it's terrible.
It's written on the wall in some of these ways.
Right.
And for me, I could no longer stand by it. And so I tried to create change. And anytime you try to change something of great depth, it is met with resistance. And in 2019, 2020, I ended up getting fired. I still remember I got brought into a room. They said, "Are you on our team? Or are you on theirs?" I said, I thought we were on the same team, like not having to
Hmm.
pick sides.
So
And
this, just to be clear, this is are you on the management slash ownership team or the players team? Right.
correct,
Okay.
correct. And I always thought I was on the players team. That was
Right.
who I worked for. That was who I was operating for.
Right.
And uh, and so that
But you
was
didn't know there were two teams. I mean, you thought they were all
correct.
the same
Exactly.
team. So,
And so that was the day. So that was the last day that I spent in the National Hockey League.
wow.
And I ended up obviously getting fired, laid down
So,
my NHL career to go and take a stand for what I knew was right, and that there was something else that needed to be done of looking deeper into how can we help not only these players and these athletes, but people in general, and
mhm,
get more purposeful, specific, and focused on
mhm,
how can we create real change in somebody. Because all of a sudden, if you're foggy brained, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're having gut issues, if you're having aches and pains, if you're having chronic headaches and fatigue, those aren't natural. Those are not just a sign of aging. If I'm on podcast here, I'm doing air quotes. Those are not
yeah.
just a sign of aging. That's
Yeah.
not just what 55 feels like. That's just not what 45 feels like that's what we've been made to believe. It's
Mhm,
what I call the fake health continuum. On the
yeah.
far left side, we've got death and sickness. On the far right side, we've got true health optimization. And in the middle, we've got this large gray area of fake health that's disease free. We don't yet have disease that we have to get treated for something, but we're full of symptoms.
Hmm.
And we are told that that's okay, that we just have to now handle those and keep operating. But what's actually happening is at the cellular level, our body is continually trying to make up for all the dysfunction that's happening, all of the dissociation that's happening, all of the malnutrition, all of the cellular mutation that's happening to continue to steal from Peter to pay Paul.
Mhm,
And our body is falling apart at the core.
mhm,
And we're thinking that that's normal. And 95% of us don't know what it feels like to feel great. We just know what it
sure.
feels like to feel like ourselves. And so what we are striving to do is to make that fake health continuum smaller and shift it further to the left, closer to that disease and sickness, and open up that right side of the spectrum, which is true health optimization, and make it more applicable, more accessible, and more
Mhm.
personalized to every single person out there, so that they can ultimately make sense and make very simple out of this very complex issue.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, I mean, everything you said, I agree with 100%. It's just, yeah, we whether it's intentional or not, we've all accepted, most of us have accepted the fact that I have these aches and pains, and I'm, not sleeping well because I am getting older, and such is life. So just kind of, bury bury your head in the sand and just make the most of it and drive on. But yeah, it was just we just my wife and kids, we just came back from a long weekend in West Virginia, and we stopped at this little town in West Virginia. Nothing against this little town in West Virginia, but I saw, man, so many people get out of their truck and walk into the 7-Eleven. And I say walk, and I should be using air quotes, because it's like, I mean, just you would have, they can barely function, and no one's, I thought it was odd, because it's just like, how is this normal? I mean, it's just, but that's what we've accepted, and that's what we, that's kind of the norm. But curious, because I know you are super passionate about, helping people, but I want to dive in slightly more on kind of, why was there such resistance from the league or from the team? And in other words, what were you doing that was viewed as a threat?
So number one, and there was a whole documentary that came out on this after. It was a 30 for 30 through ESPN.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think the big thing that was there was one, the medical board or the medical team that was running it um, comes typically from a sponsored medical board, right? Comes from a medical team. So you've got, say, Boston Health as the official hospital of the Boston Bruins, or you've got Nationwide Medical as the health sponsor of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And so you keep going down these lines, or down these, you keep tracing the money trail, and the teams actually work, and the doctors actually work for the medical board that's there. And so they don't know any better, and it just becomes this, it's this big conglomerate that they've got these systems that they're kind of working off of, and there's a money trail somewhere, and it's not the best interest of the player to find the real solution. Just like in our medical, for anybody, it's not in the best interest of the pharmaceutical companies, the government, or anybody to keep us well and healthy, because there's no money in that. There's no, it stops the cycle of money in that way. And if you really you want to get like really deep into these things, you start to look at even the way that our food is created, the number of companies that are operating and control it. There's really two. And I mean, Monsanto is a big one that controls everything that goes on. So when you think about, like, we have to actually label non-GMO food, like, shouldn't everything be non-GMO? We have to have like an organic section of the fruit section. So if this is organic, what's the other one? Like, let's just think of that mind concept for a second. If we have to label food as like high quality food in the grocery store, then what's all the other stuff? And so it comes to that same concept. Is I was a guy who was seen as a performance director of a team. I'm not an MD. I'm not a surgeon. I'm not the guy performing this. I'm 26, 27 years old.
Some young kid who doesn't know anything.
And so these were the, that was kind of what was put in place. And I was just willing to stand my ground, take my licks, and firmly believed in what my knowledge was, what my research was, what my study was, what my education was, what my experience was, and was just willing to put my job on the line and my reputation, because I was not willing to be okay with the status quo. I could not understand how anybody could be okay making somebody sick, putting them into that type of situation and saying, oh no, we're doing the right thing. And for me, being able to put my head on my pillow at night saying, hey, that is not the best way to do this. We can challenge the status quo. I'm not about being right. I'm about finding the best solution. And just in this scenario, my solution happened to be better than what we were doing. And and was willing to put that down there. It's like anything. Like, here's the other thing that, and I kind of go back to how I started, is if we could interview your body and your body tell us exactly what it needed, and you'd be able to feel great and function at a high level, wouldn't that be interesting? Well, I know your audience is a lot of real estate people, a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneurs. If I ever said to you, hey, Jamie, I've got this amazing investment deal for you. Amazing. It's incredible. It's going to give you a great return. It's going to yield something incredible. And you're like, oh, and I said, I just need $1 million. And you're like, okay, cool, Justin. Can you give me some of the numbers on it? I don't have any, but like, just trust me. Just like put $1 million in, and I promise you it'll be great. You'd look at me like I had 3 eyes. And then if I said, so that's the investment side. Then if I said, hey, Jamie, here's all the information, here's all the data, everything that you could ever want on multifamily. This is exactly, like, we're in Nashville, Tennessee. Here's everything that you could ever want to know on the market and what's happening. Great, amazing. You can now make a really educated decision on what you're doing. But then, and this is like, say you get tested once, but now you never do it ever again. And I come back to you a year from now and I say, hey, Jamie, here's a multifamily property home, but you haven't looked at multifamily info in a year. And I'm like, do you want in or not? And you're like, well, can you give me some information? No, I don't have any. You can only go off of what you had last year. That makes no sense either. And then you come to the next one, the entrepreneur, and you're like, hey, I know we're running Facebook ads. We had 8 that we tested. We're just going to take $1 million and we're going to split it up amongst all 8 again. Why would you not look at the data? We never run our businesses this way. We never run our investments this way. We never run our real estate this way. So why do we run our bodies without having information on what it is that we need so that we can get the best possible outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this is just a quick anecdote, but probably 10, 12 years ago, I was having a lot of back pain, and actually it seems to be returning, but I finally resisted. I actually tried acupuncture, tried a lot of different things, and then finally stopped resisting. And I went into the medical experts, and I got a lot of different opinions, and I don't think they were all, I don't necessarily believe it's this huge conspiracy. I think sometimes it's just a lack of education, or, but that's a whole separate discussion. But essentially I was just given a prescription for tramadol, and told that I'll never lift anything heavy again.
Mhm.
I can never move a couch for a friend or anything. I was 35. I'm 46 now, and I was in decent shape, but so it kind of, it was depressing to hear that, because what kind of future is that, right? And there's a lot more to that story. We can talk offline, but I'm sure you're not surprised by any of that. But I was pretty shocked that it was just because the more you research tramadol, they claim it's not a it's a pseudo narcotic, I guess. It's pretty addictive. From If you read forums and things, it's
anything that changes the way that you feel
yeah,
is going to have an addictive capability to it.
yeah.
Anything that changes your normal day-to-day state is going to be
So
high.
you'll like this though. Guess what I believe fixed my back? Deadlifts.
Weird.
I eventually went back to CrossFit, or and started doing some first light deadlifts, and then it started increasing it, and got back into throwing some weights around, quote unquote. Felt so much better, and that didn't fully solve everything, but it was, I mean, it was just a shock to me that our medical system would, just, here's your prescription, and after a couple x-rays and one MRI, and that's the extent of the testing. Thankfully I did have one surgeon say that, hey, he said, I make my money doing surgery, you don't need surgery, come back to me in 5 or 10 years, maybe you'll need surgery at that point. So I'm glad I didn't go down that road. But so back to your story. So the team and the league saw you, and these are my words, but as a threat to kind of the regime, or the money making system. Is that fair to say?
I don't even know if it was that. It was that I think it came as it was something different. It was
Gotcha.
different. They didn't want to change. They didn't understand it and saw it as a threat.
Got it.
And at that point, it was something that they didn't want to learn about. They didn't want to educate themselves about. They didn't want to lean
Yep.
in. It's just easier to,
Yeah.
hey, get rid of the get rid of the guy
Right.
trying to create
Yeah.
something new. Get rid of the guy
Yeah.
that's not towing the rope,
Right.
pulling in the same direction as us, and it's easier to
I'd like to believe that for the most part, this isn't good. I'm not defending this, but I'd like to believe that it was just easier to deal with the players the way they did, as commodities, frankly, as opposed to intentionally trying to get each player addicted or
Yeah,
something like that.
there's definitely not an intention there,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
any means. It's definitely the former, where it's just,
Sure.
hey, this guy's doing something, we don't understand it, we don't know what's
Yeah.
going on. We have, and let's face it, at a professional sports level, there's no uh, there's no loyalty to anybody, player, coach,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Right.
matter who you are. So if you're not pulling the rope in the same direction, and you're not willing to learn, educate,
Yeah.
be exposed to new things, continue to evolve and create iteration on what you're doing, the guy that is trying to do that is going to get punted really fast. And
Sure.
that's pretty much what
What
happened.
happened to you? Got it. So this was 2019, 2020. What was going through your mind, the day you got fired?
Like anything, you're like, I've held my ground. I was extremely proud of myself for that,
Mm-hmm.
standing up for those men, and by taking ownership of what I stood for and what I believed in and what I knew was right.
Mm-hmm.
But very quickly at the same time, that feeling of being truly rooted in what I was doing became like, oh shit, like that was my career. I just,
Mm-hmm.
I've,
Yeah.
I've blackballed myself a little bit because no other team's going to touch you. Although a couple months later, I had two
Mm.
teams reach out and want me to kind of come in and do work with them. And but my dream of what I've wanted to do for so long, and my identity was tied to hockey. My identity was tied to the NHL. My identity was tied to that level of status. And
Yeah.
for me, it was having to reframe my mindset and reframe the way I thought about myself, because even though I did no longer have the NHL, I
Mm-hmm.
still had everything else. I still had all my education. I still had all my knowledge. I still had all my understanding. I still had all my problem solving skills. I still had everything, just
Mm-hmm.
no NHL tag on my name anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was not, and at the time, that was something that I was fearful of. That was something that kind of held me back a little bit. And
Sure.
it wasn't until I started to speak with other entrepreneurs. It wasn't until I started to really do some deep work with my wife and really work through a lot of this that I was able to kind of put the stepping stones in place for
Mm-hmm.
what Own It became.
Mm-hmm.
And um, it was about 6 months after I got fired that the true idea for what Own It was kind of came to fruition and um, got got put on paper. And then
Mm-hmm.
it was about starting to work through it and step through it and step into it in a powerful way so that it was something that could be a real business
Mm-hmm.
and be something that really had the impact on people in a quality way. And it's like it's exciting because you're creating something out of nothing,
Right.
um, and doing something that nobody else had done. And so whenever I was telling the idea to people, and I often say this, if people aren't telling you that you're crazy, if people aren't telling you that it can't be done, if people aren't doubting you, you're not thinking big enough.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
I love that.
that was really what I had all the time, was people be like, there's no way you can create a personalized model out of this. There's no way that you can do something different for each person. There's no way that you can uh, that you can recreate the healthcare system. And that was something that this makes so much sense to me of how
Yep.
we operate and own it, that anything outside of it is like, why would you even partake in this? Why
Mm-hmm.
does this even exist? Why is this even a thing?
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me that
Yeah.
all of a sudden you can go and get a series of juices and do a juice cleanse. It doesn't make any sense to me that you can go and buy a red light bed and have a protocol that's supposed to cure everything. It doesn't make any sense to me that you can go and take a gut biome test and get supplementation for the year. It doesn't make any sense to me that you can do a finger prick test and somebody tell you every single thing that you are allergic to and what you should be eating, because our bodies just don't work that way. They're
Mm-hmm.
continually ever changing. They're
Mm-hmm.
continually adapting to what's in front of us. And so if
Mm-hmm.
that's not something that's continually kept up, it's just like that guy who went and looked at the multifamily homes
Right.
in December of
Mm-hmm.
2020,
Yeah.
and now in December of 2021 was told to go buy something
Right.
with no understanding
No
of what
up.
the market's doing.
Sure.
And so it's like the way that we do it, if we actually get intentional, if we actually become aware and we start asking questions, we're like, yeah, like this makes no sense. This makes absolutely negative sense. Perfect example is we were working with a client the other day, and um, suffering from aches and pains, aches in the shoulders, knees, ankles, wrists, would wake up with low back pain all the time, chronic fatigue, especially midday.
Wait, have you been
And
spying on me?
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
and the client had gone to the doctor a long time ago
Yeah.
and had given them prescription for like arthritis.
Hmm.
And when you start to take arthritis medication, it
Hmm.
actually starts to activate and create either osteoporosis. It starts to make that happen a lot quicker because of what it's doing and what it's shunting and to eliminate some of the inflammation that's happening in the joints. Well, when we actually started running tests, we figured out from a couple genetic predispositions, as well as what he was showing in cellular nutritional dysfunction. So he had chronic vitamin D deficiency. And if you actually start going down the scale
Hmm.
of what shows up in an individual, vitamin D and vitamin D3 is the most important micronutrient in the body.
Hmm.
And a lot of us can't actually break it down into a usable form. And so we're chronically vitamin D deficient, even if we are out in the sunlight and we're taking a vitamin D3 supplement.
Hmm.
So this guy was given a prescription drug that he didn't need, that was going to lead him to something that he didn't have to suffer from, which was osteoporosis,
Hmm.
if the intervention had not happened. And
Right.
then what would have happened is he would have had to be treated for osteoporosis,
Right.
which would have led to premature and early death.
Hmm.
He would have
So it's,
died. He would have died years before he had to, simply because of what happened. Take a look. If somebody is out there, I would love you to take a look. What is the third highest cause of death in America? What do you think?
um, I, I don't know. I would say heart disease is up there, cancer. Um, Not sure. What is
I
it?
hope everybody is sitting down for this. The third highest cause of death in the United States of America is medical error.
Seriously?
Medical error. Look it up on Google right now. Third
Really?
highest
Wow.
cause of death in the United States is medical error.
That's mind blowing.
I don't know any other industry
Yeah.
that you could be wrong. And quite frankly, like could you go and be a roofer and have one of three homes the roof fall in and be like, oh
Right.
shoot,
Yeah.
and keep getting hired? Not
Sure.
a chance.
Right.
The third highest cause of
Wow.
death in America is medical error. And so when we come and take a look at this in this exact example I just gave you,
Yeah.
this guy was a 37-year-old man
Wow.
and would have taken him down this road, probably would have taken 20 years, 25 years, but never would we have ever gone back to, oh, do you remember when
Sure.
you took that medication for
So what's
the
the
arthritis they had going on?
without spilling the, secret sauce, if you will. So what was the solution, or is there an answer for him?
Oh, yeah, it's simple. I don't say cure. We solved the problem in about 6 weeks. And it was just about being able to utilize a methylated form of vitamin D3 contained
Hmm.
with another methylated form of calcium that increases the upregulation and uptake of that vitamin D to make sure
Hmm.
that it's utilized in the body. That simple is being able to understand what you have to put into your body and when and how, and the formulation of what, and
Hmm.
the formulation and combination of when it happens. It really comes down to it being that simple.
Wow.
It's when we can start to take a look at the compounds that you need, because anything we put into our body, food, supplementation, water, it doesn't
Mhm.
go in a usable form. We can't take in a
Yeah, we have to
steak.
break it down, right?
Exactly. We can't
Yep.
take in a steak and it immediately be utilized as fuel. It needs to be broken down into different peptide form, amino acids,
Right.
protein, enzymes that can ultimately be used into something else. Same thing with Vitamin C, it needs to be broken down into ascorbic acid so that it can be utilized in an appropriate way. All of these things that go into our body, they have to be broken down into a usable form. And so if we don't have the enzyme to break it down, if we don't have the cofactor in order to absorb it, it's just a
Yeah.
waste product. And we're continually going through this journey that doesn't allow us to truly have the body function the way that it should. And it's not out of a fault of our own. It's just
Right.
that we don't realize
Yeah.
what our body needs. But if we were able to interview it, if we were able to ask it, we would know.
Wow. Yeah. So I can tell you essentially you must see everyone as like a zombie, and they don't even know that they're walking around like a zombie. But you see a solution, and I can tell it's frustrating but inspiring at the same time for you, because you are able to help people. So briefly walk us through, what was it like from a business standpoint, and then I want to ask about maybe another case study, just because I know you had several very good case studies when I met you. But from when you started, just from a business standpoint, I know you're not the kind of the business guy per se, but what has that been like, not from an individual health perspective, but just from a business standpoint for the entrepreneurs out there? What's your journey been like over the last 3 years?
So I would say a lot of the journey has come down to mission and movement over business. And what I mean by that is this is so often, and I firmly believe this, is so often we try to talk about like spreadsheets, P&Ls, and like how do we create profitability. That will all happen
Mm-hmm.
when you're on mission and truly solving a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for us, and again, we're completely self-funded. My
Mm-hmm.
wife and I put this together
Mm-hmm.
simply off of the idea and the concept, and had people trust us and come in to continue to allow us to help us build.
Mm-hmm.
She's been amazing in being able to understand how do we scale our team, how do we build our team so that we maintain profitability, we maintain cash flow, we can maintain our
Mm-hmm.
ability to impact. But at the same time, we were always focused on the movement and and the mission in which we were doing, and being
Mm-hmm.
steadfast to that, and making sure that we didn't deviate from that, making sure that we didn't have any change of direction that was money driven, but rather stayed steadfast to the movement and
Mm-hmm.
to the mission.
Got
Um,
it.
and that was extremely
Yeah.
important for us. The other was truly trusting what we were doing, and we're firmly rooted in our faith and
Mm-hmm.
having a strong trust that like where God was calling us to go and what we were being called to do
Yeah.
was something that was going to be um, uh, withheld and
Mm-hmm.
supported because His hand was all over it. So making sure that there was trust over clarity sometimes, and just knowing, hey, this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I was firmly rooted in that decision to stand up and say, hey, I'm not participating in this and foregoing
Mm-hmm.
my career. It was trust over clarity at that point, and trust over
Yeah.
clarity has gotten us through business as well.
Hmm. That's really good. Yeah, I'm clearly because people have this debate of how to be successful, right? And some people say, "Oh, I got to focus on being happy, do what you love, and then you're never gonna work a day in your life," kind of thing. That's fine. And that's good. Yeah, but there's a whole, the way the world works is it's really all about solving problems and adding value.
Yeah.
And that's what's right now coming to me as far as front and center from this episode is if we did a Venn diagram about what you are passionate about and solving very real problems for people. I mean, there's a huge crossover there. So I just love the fact that you've taken this, you very intentionally taken this from a perspective of solving problems and helping people. So it's not all about Justin, it's about adding value to everyone out there, really. But it's also something that you obviously have a passion for and you're interested in from a personal standpoint. So I would think success is only gonna follow for sure.
There's something I want to add even to that, Jamie, is because for each and every person out there, there's there's something that I like to call like your inner discontent, this like spiritual claustrophobia. There's something that every day just frustrates you.
Hmm.
And for me, obviously, it's the way that we treat our bodies and to
Right.
realize the potential that exists there.
Right.
I know that that inner discontent in me, it's been there for a long time. It's been there for probably 20 years. And I didn't have a solution to it. I didn't have the solution to it right away. But
Hmm.
I continued to lean into that. I continued to say, hey, you know what? There's something there. And there was iterations in my story. Part of
Hmm.
my iterations was through schooling. Part of my iterations was on my experimenting on myself. Part of my iterations was through my experience in sports. Part of my iterations was in getting fired. All of these things were iterations of what I was doing. Today, it just looked different in a different arena, in a different place, doing a different thing. But it was always steadfast on that inner discontent that existed there. And that inner discontent is that key that you are ultimately going to get to open somebody else's door. And your calling is somebody else's miracle. You have to be held on to that. Your calling, that problem you're trying to solve, that calling, that inner discontent that exists within you is somebody else's miracle that they are waiting for, that they are waiting for that solution. They are waiting for that thing to happen. They are waiting for that problem to be solved because they are struggling in their life, whether they know it or not. And the moment that it's made aware, they are able to lean in and be able to turn that key and have the door open and the floodgates open so that they can ultimately realize that win as well.
Hmm. Wow, that's a mic drop moment right there. That's the passion that I experienced in Scottsdale. That's awesome. So, as we start to wrap up here, because it's there's so much I'd love to follow up on, but obviously we're running out of time. Um, I'm going to fire off a few rapid fire questions, but do you have any other like another quick case study that comes to mind as far as somebody you've seen success with, who you've worked with?
Yeah, so I mean, so many, but like just one right off the bat is one guy who was a diabetic and he was shooting 100 units of insulin a day, had continued to from his doc had said, hey, just increase the insulin units and keep increasing these. He was increasingly gaining weight. He was increasingly getting tired. He was increasingly sleeping poor. And when we actually came back and started to look at how his body was functioning, nutritional dysfunction was like out of this world. Like when I say that I don't know if I've seen more nutrient dysfunctional cells in my life. I don't know if I have ever seen cells that D3, B12, vitamin C, iron, folate, choline, you name it, down the list, it was either borderline or functionally deficient. And whenever, and to kind of think about it this way, think about like you're going to wash a floor with a sponge, but the sponge has been dried out. How effective is that going to be for washing a floor?
Sure, not at
Not
all.
really effective. And so that's what you end up, that's what his cells were like.
Hmm.
They're just kind of there, just barely alive.
Hmm.
And so no matter what he would eat, you weren't going to absorb the nutrients. No matter how much insulin you shot, you weren't going to feel any better. You were going to continue to have weight gain. You were going to continue to have inflammation. You were going to continue to have fatigue. And that's what we ended up seeing. And so when we started to supplement him the right way, when we were able to get him back on a quality sleep routine, when we were able to get him back on a quality food adjustment, when we were able to calm down his gut biome from everything that was going on, he was able to drop 60 pounds. He
Wow.
was able to completely, he went down from 100 units of insulin a day to 10 units of insulin a month and completely transformed the way that he felt. And if you look at him pre and you look at him post,
Hmm.
you don't recognize the guy. And it's amazing just to see the impact of when you
Hmm.
look at what the body needs, you look at what it's asking for, and you provide it for it, what the outcomes are.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so let's fire off a few questions, then we'll get out of here.
Cool.
What's one thing that people misunderstand about you, Justin?
That I'm an asshole.
So they think you are and you aren't, or they think you aren't and you are?
No, if you ask my wife that one. No, I think to be honest with you, I'm so passionate about what I do.
Yeah.
I am so steadfast and grounded
Yeah.
in in my conviction
Right.
that I can come across, I can come across as a bit of an asshole sometimes.
Got it. Understood. No, that's really good. Um, what's one of your biggest kind of failures or setbacks that we haven't talked about? Anything come to mind that you'd like maybe a do-over, or something? I'm sure you've learned from it, but something that others might view as a failure or setback.
I love this question, and you probably won't like my answer, but I've had so many setbacks and failures in my life, and I would not change any of them for anything. Firmly, because again, I'm so rooted in my faith that I believe that God was preparing me for what I'm doing now. And if I hadn't gone through them, I would not have been equipped. I would not have been ready. I would not have been able to withstand what it is that I'm doing now. It was literally preparing me for this journey that I'm going on, and everything that I've been through, I had to go through in order to get to be the person that I am today on the
Yeah.
other side of that.
That's great.
Another failure or setback, I think, would have been, I mean, I was addicted to opiates at a certain point in my life.
Mm,
I got divorced, and
mm,
talk about addiction.
mm.
That was me. I think I said at the beginning, addicted to hockey, addicted to schooling, addicted to
Yeah.
pills, addicted to work. It cost me
Mhm.
my first marriage.
Mm,
All of these things, I could kind of go down the list
mm,
of how that works, but all of those things ultimately set me up to learn from them, but even more
mhm,
so from them, become the person that I had to become
mm.
in order to serve at the level in which we're now serving.
I love it. That's great. If you were given $10 million tomorrow, what would you do with it?
I would come to Wealth Without Wall Street and
There you
invest
go.
it passively. No, yeah. So definitely, I would invest a good chunk of it, but figure out how to get a passive income return monthly that I could set my family up so that they wouldn't have. And when I say my family, I'm talking about my parents. I'm talking about Elisa's parents. I'm talking about everybody within our direct ecosystem that would help them to live the life that they wanted, but then also give back to the church that has also set us free in so many different ways.
Love it. It's really good. What's one challenge that you're facing in your business right now?
I would say, to be honest, marketing. Marketing is something that is none of our expertise is, and
Mhm,
being able to uh, get a microphone or a megaphone to
mhm.
what it is we do and how we do it.
Yep.
It's something that um, is an opportunity that we have right now that we're really trying to solve for.
Got it. What is a book that you'd recommend?
Ooh, Second Chair.
Hmm.
Um, it's a good one. Another one, just because he's a great friend and it's an amazing book, is Your Purpose is Calling by Darius Daniels. Really, really great.
Hmm. I don't know if I'm not sure if I've heard of that. Cool. I'll check that out. What is one question that I have not asked that you wish I had?
I don't know. You kind of you got to everything pretty well. Um,
Is there
so
anything else you want to cover before we wrap everything up?
two things that I think summarize everything pretty well. Um, Number one is when you're talking about business, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs, executives, real estate people are in this,
Yeah.
is there's certain stages in everybody's business career, and
Hmm.
we're all looking for a championship, or we're all looking for a win.
Right.
And there's 10 things that I say you have to, or 10 ships that you have to
Mm,
set sail before you win the championship. And those 10 ships are leadership, ownership, membership, partnership, relationship, stewardship, battleship, fellowship, craftsmanship, and hardship. They're all
mm,
ships that you have to board in order to yield what comes in a championship or a win, and being willing to pay the price in order to do that and kind of lean into that and experience that. So, um, that's number one. And number two is everything that I've just spoken about today. I know it can seem overwhelming. It can seem new. It can seem like, I don't necessarily get it.
Right.
It's accessible to everybody. It's something that you have literally at your fingertips. We can interview your body. We can know exactly what you need. We can give you the data. We can run your body just like your business. We can look at your body's P&L and understand where it's lacking, where it needs attention, and where we need to focus for this quarter, so that we can ultimately get you to where you want to be and be functioning at a high level. It's not something that is behind an ironclad wall that has to exist with your doctor, that has to exist only in pro sports anymore. It's something that is accessible to each and every person, and you can lean into it. It can be there for you. It's available. You just have to be willing to step through that door and say, hey, this is the calling that I need to step into, to put myself in the right place so that I can realize my God-given purpose at a higher level.
Yeah, it's awesome. And just for the listeners out there, in the interest of full disclosure, I've signed up with Justin and I'm just getting started. I have my first round of test kits. Haven't even had a chance yet I just got them last night. So I'm going to do those, start on those and get them back in. And I've said yes, I guess is the point. And so, because it can be overwhelming. It can also be, I'm so focused on my own business and trying to solve other problems. And it's like, it can be viewed as, oh, that sounds good, or that's something I know I should do. But the reality is, I mean, the people you're helping, Justin, they're going to be more effective and efficient entrepreneurs, family members, whatever you want to say. They're going to be better at everything, every day, because their health is so key, and their energy levels. And so, yeah,
I always say, entrepreneurs, high performing people, you've got hundreds of dreams, you've got hundreds of goals.
Yeah.
The moment you lose your health, you've got one.
Yeah, no, that's true. No, the people say, I think Warren Buffett is 93 years old, and I think most people would rather be 22 than 93 and have $70 billion or whatever he has. So yeah, your health and your time are critically important. So Justin, I know we've gone a little bit long here. I really appreciate you taking the time to add value to our listeners, and I'm excited to get to know you better and kind of own my own journey here, because I know there's some work to do on my part. It's not just spoon fed. But so for our listeners out there, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so I'm super active on social media, just at Justin Roth. And then if you just go to ownitcoaching.com, you can find all information and contact info there.
And at Justin Roth, can you spell that for everyone?
At Justin, JUSTIN ROETH.
Just want to make sure we got the right, following the right guy.
If he's trying to sell you Bitcoin or has the best newest fund available, that's not me.
That's not you. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Justin. Really appreciate it. This has been fantastic. And to our listeners out there, we appreciate you, and thank you for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.